It's lost. My position is bad, but it's not completely lost. We still have minimum fighting chances. We still have some minimum chances here. Okay, not with that move. She doesn't care about this because my king is in trouble. I guess this is the moment. This is the moment. Mr. Scheiber would tell me, just take it, I'll take it and then resign. I'll take it because after rook d3. Did you see this check coming? I did, Beth, but I could not stop it. I blew it. I think we had it. I'm gonna resign. Well played, Beth Harmon. If I move the king, I'm getting mated in a few moves. Well done. Well done. Haha. Beth, at the age of 20, is ready to take on the world's best players and is getting invites to top events for the opportunity to prove herself as a grandmaster. Will you accept the invite? I'm gonna accept the invite again, Beth, and hope to do my best. Let's try again to beat 20-year-old Beth Harmon, shall we? Hello, I'm looking for a challenge. Can you provide that for me? I hope to provide it better this time, Beth. I sure hope to provide it better. Game. Let's see, what is she saying after e5? I've been studying these positions on my ceiling since I was 8. Seriously, Beth, on your ceiling? I did not know about that. I'm gonna play the Ruy Lopez, which is bishop b5, and I'm gonna drop the bishop back to a4, which is the main response to a6. She's playing knight f6. I don't like too much the lines that allow the capture here, although I guess I could go for it here. So the Berlin defense is one of the least liked by me and many others, the Berlin defense and the Berlin endgame, but in this position it's not the same if you allow the capture on e4, so I will castle first and then go for d3. I was gonna say, but no, she's taking my pawn. Anna, are you sure you wanted this? No, I'm not sure at all I wanted this. Man, I don't know if I wanted to go for this. Now I'm regretting it. Normally I defend my pawn with d3. How many more captures until this game is over, I wonder? Don't be so impatient, Beth. I'm taking this pawn and I'm threatening to win the queen. She realized it. Of course, she's a very strong player. After this capture, I was threatening to take here, give a check, discover check, and capture the queen. She has noticed it and prevented it. Now this is as far as my theoretical knowledge goes. I normally don't give up the e4 pawn. I normally play with d3, so I'm gonna invent the rest of this. What do I need to play? d4 seems to be a very natural continuation because it pushes a pawn in the center, attacks the knight on c5, allows my bishop to be developed. Other moves that come to mind, queen h5, for instance, to attack this pawn directly and threaten checkmate. But I believe black will simply castle, and that protects the pawn because the rook from f8 will be guarding the pawn. So let's go and push d4 instead. Now, this is the most natural response, and it attacks my pawn, so I cannot just continue with natural developing moves. I'm gonna have to address that this pawn is hanging. I think I'll still want to develop, so I'll place my bishop here, even if it's not the ideal square for my bishop, but right now I don't really have better options for the bishop anyway, and I needed to defend the pawn. She castles kingside, which makes a lot of sense, and now let's see what other moves I can go for in order to develop my queen side. Knight to c3 is, I think, one of my main options. If I place my knight here, unfortunately that will give up my pawn. Let's see. She's pushing f6 to chase my knight away from e5. I can go here, 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 here. Those are my legal moves that don't lose the knight instantly. Most natural usually is the f3 square, and yeah, I don't really see a reason why not to choose that one. b5. Well, where are you going, Beth? Wait a second. Hold on. Pushing f6 and b5. I think this is a brave combination, but hopefully not the best one. Hopefully not a very good one. What I'm thinking is that because of f6, this knight is less protected. It's only the bishop that's guarding it. I have a rook on this file, so this could be a vulnerable piece. I don't have a light squared bishop. That's the bishop I had to give up earlier. But in any case, b5, I think, is maybe a bit too much. I wouldn't have played it because you don't really want to place the bishop here. That would be blocked by the pawn, and at the same time the control of the e6 square, that vulnerable knight. I don't think b5 is that strong, unless she's just doing it to expand. But every pawn push and every move in general has its consequences, and I don't think pushing here with the doubled pawns on c6 and c7 is that good for her. I hope to prove her wrong. I think this is not the best. Hidron, thank you so much for the subscription. Maybe here I am saying it's not the best and it's all theory, but I don't consider this a good move. At the same time, it's not like it has a refutation. I can't really exploit it, I think. So without further ado, let's just jump here with the knight. That's a nice spot for it in the center. f5. Ooh, wait, did I just blunder this? Have I underestimated the potential of f5, f4? f4 will chase my bishop away from e3. Maybe knight e4 wasn't as good as it looked. I can try to play knight g5, not, but knight c5. If we trade here, it's not ideal. It's not ideal, but maybe playable. I guess I shouldn't have played knight e4. In hindsight, I wish I could take it back, but there's no such thing as take back. In traditional chess, that's not how you play it. The issue is, if I just come back, she will push f4, gains even more space on the king side. I'm gonna have to drop back the knight to not the knight, but the bishop to c1 in order to keep the pawn guarded. My position is falling apart, and if I place the knight on g3, it's even worse, because f4 is a fork that will attack my minor pieces, two of these at the same time. Do I then just have to play knight c5 to release the pressure? Because after trading these pieces, at least my pawn is not hanging. I guess I have to, but this is sad. This is really sad, because I wanted to go for being ahead in development, and now my bishop is struggling. It only has 2 squares. If I go to d2, this pawn is in the air. I might have to... Oh wait, it's actually not that much in the air, because this will be in the air too. So what I'm saying is bishop to d2. The issue will be that black will take on c5, because if it was d4, bishop d2, knight takes d4, knight takes, queen takes, this too is hanging, not just my knight on c5. But I think the problem with bishop d2 is that after this trade, I'm just a pawn down. It's a pair of bishops for black and a pawn down for me. Not ideal, so I might have to take here first, but that will develop her bishop. At the same time, after this capture, at least I have some tactics. Takes, bishop takes f4. Both bishops will be hanging, so I might have to go for that, even if I normally don't like to develop my opponent's pieces. So as much as I have to go for it, and as much as it looks like I can win a pawn, I'm not too happy about it, because look at her bishop. So it is now a pawn up for me, but I have helped her bishop to be developed. There's loads of pressure here. If I move away with my bishop, then she can take on f3. If I just make a bishop move, bishop takes f3 is very strong for black, because I have to take back with the pawn, which will damage my king a lot. The protection, the safety of my king. Trouble. So I'm gonna have to think whether I can just try to survive by defending it. Oh, it feels so bad when the f file is open. If I push g3, g5, and then this is hanging. Goodness me. Goodness me. So g3, g5, I think I'm losing a piece there, because once I move the bishop, this is hanging, and I can't take on g5. Both the e7 bishop and the queen on d8 are protecting it. So g3 is a bad move, but I don't really have many other options. If I guard my bishop with the queen, same idea. Black will take on f3. I think my king will be really, really weak. Maybe I could try to place the bishop here at least, and use it as a shield in front of my king, because my pawn structure will be very, very weak. Let's go for it. At least my bishop is helping a little bit to keep... She's not taking? I was sure she wanted to take, because at least that damages my pawn structure and my king will be more vulnerable. She's not taking it, so I have a chance. I have a moment here, a move to step away from this capture. Why is she letting me go away? Why is she letting me jump away? Because she wants to keep the bishop that much? I mean, it's a very powerful piece, so I can see her point. But I thought that this capture was just very appealing to destroy my pawn structure. So it's time for me to run away with the knight and jump to e5, which is a beautiful spot. This bishop is terribly strong at the same time. c5 to challenge my center, my pawn structure. If I take, bishop takes, those two bishops are extremely powerful. Well, not that diagonal, I guess I just cannot draw. This one and this one, a pair of bishops. I could just not take for now, because if she takes, I can take back with the queen. If she takes, I can take back with the queen, and there are no tricks at the moment, no discovered attacks, because the bishop cannot run away with a check. There's no discovered attack against my queen. So for now, I could do something else, but it's not so easy to do something else. My instinct would be to move the queen to then be able to bring the rook, but I'm gonna lose a tempo, because the moment she takes, I'm gonna have to take with the queen regardless. What do I do? What do I do? I'm also thinking whether it makes sense to force issues on the queen side by pushing, for instance, a4 and c. She will not take it, because that will give some good opening of the a5 for my rook. My rook would be very powerful. Well, not very. I guess it's a bit of an overstatement, but it would be quite a nice piece, I'm saying, after a4. I think after a4 she would not take it, but perhaps push b4. But that fixes the structure, so it's something to think about. Because overall, I would like the structure to be somewhat more fixed, so that my knight has good post, an outpost, potential outpost later on the queen side too. For now, I'm really liking it on e5, of course. That's a great spot. That's an amazing square for the knight. But I need to challenge somehow this bishop in the future, and I don't quite see how. If I could push b3, c4, but then again, this bishop will stay on the long diagonal, so I don't achieve much. Knight c6, as you guys are asking, is not really an alternative for me, because the bishop will simply take it. Unfortunately, there's no way I can win material here. So I'm thinking of these options, a4 or b3, c4, or simply move the queen and then bring the rook. I guess I could just move the queen, because at least in that sense, she either has to take, or I get to move the rook to d1, because that's for me priority, to develop this rook, get it into the game. On the d file it will look very nice and strong. She's taking, so now I'm just double checking that after queen takes d4 there's nothing hanging, because my queen is unprotected on d4, but the bishop cannot move away with a check. That's why I can take it for now. If my king was on h1, I would be in trouble, because a bishop takes g2 check, winning my queen. Bishop to b4 she's playing. Well, I think I can just respond to this by playing c3. What's her point? Why is she making this move? Not quite sure why she wanted to play this and then go back. It feels like a waste of time. And my pawn on c3 is fine. It's even guarding my queen. So I don't think bishop b4 was accurate for her. Especially if you need to go back to the square you are coming from. You don't achieve anything, because this is good for me. There are other positions where forcing a pawn push is good for you, even if you are wasting time, sort of wasting time by going back and forth. But if the pawn on this square would be bad for me, then it may make sense. If it makes no sense though if it's good for me to push the pawn there. That's my thinking. Now I want to bring the rook here. I'm just thinking whether she can take here. I would assume not, because of the d file. There could be tactics if my queen moves away, or if I have knight c6. I think I have knight c6 immediately. So rook a d1. If the bishop takes my pawn, knight to c6, attacks the queen, attacks the bishop. If she takes my queen, I can take on e7 first with a check and then take back the queen, and I'm a piece up. That's my calculation. I hope it's correct. So after rook a d1, I don't think she can take the pawn. What does she need to do then? The bishop is hanging. and she cannot give me the c6 square, so I think she will go back to b7. I think that's what she'll do. But then there's some danger here already with the d5. Okay, c6. Well, that makes more sense to keep the c5 close, because it feels like if she moved the bishop away, there would be trouble. Maybe c6 then is the only move. It could well be the only move for black. And now what? Now I really wish I could push c4 and chase it away. If I play b3, it might be a bit slow, but that threatens c4. Will I just play that, or is there something better here? I could also move the queen away, because then I'm threatening to capture the pawn, because the rook is pinning the bishop on d5. How does she respond if I just move my queen away? I could just move it away. Queen to g4. I don't think she has a good counter to that. Maybe she'll try to trade the queens, but as soon as the queen moves away, at least there's tactics about the bishop being unprotected on e7. So I could, for instance, trade queens and then take this pawn, then take the bishop. I like queen g4. I'm sure that she has a way to get out of this. She can move the queen away, or queen c8. She's going for the trade. Queen c7, I think, also made sense, but it's getting more and more difficult for her, I think, to step out of every tactical motive. Now, I have a choice between trading queens or keeping it on the board. If I want to keep it on the board, I could place it on, for instance, h5. If I trade, though, then there are immediate tactics, so that makes it appealing. I would normally not want to trade, because I feel like I have some more potential against his about the black king than how's my one. I think my one is really safe for now, and the black king is more vulnerable because the f-pawn is missing. The knight is standing great on e5. I've got d5, I've got my queen here, so I would ideally keep the queen on the board, but if there's something concrete, you might want to consider the trade, because after the capture I could take on c6, because then my rook is attacking the e7 bishop. So queen takes, rook takes, knight takes. If bishop takes or rook takes, well, I guess bishop takes, because if not, this bishop too is hanging. So bishop takes, rook takes e7. I'm a pawn up. It's an opposite color bishop endgame, but I'm a pawn up and I have a rook on the 7th rank already. That's very tempting to do. Maybe it's not that big of a deal because of the opposite color bishop, but it's a pawn. Can she do anything about it? Queen takes, rook takes, knight takes. If she moves the bishop, but if she just moves the bishop away, I'll then give a check on e7 and it's the same. Let's go for the endgame. My queen was no longer necessary for victory. What do you mean? You're defending, Beth. You are trying to survive this game, because now, so again, I have this, I also have this. If knight d7, both the bishop and the rook are hanging, but knight d7, I think she has rook e8, which guards the bishop, and I don't see a follow-up. Unless it's another knight jump, knight b6, attacking these two. Then the rook will come here to guard the d5 bishop. What's that position like? I have bishop c7 there. Oh, I'm trapping the rook. Look at this, knight d7. Okay, she also has this move, but I was just looking at knight d7, rook e8, knight b6, rook d8 is the only move for the rook, and then I have bishop c7, and this rook is trapped. So I think after knight d7, she has to go to f7 with the rook to guard the bishop, and then after knight b6 she has more squares for the rook, but then even if she doesn't go to d8, I can take on d5. And then it's not opposite color bishops, but normal bishops. Yeah, I want to get rid of the d5 bishop. I think we have this. I think we've got this. Thank you so much for the new comment for PogChamps. Thank you so much to my team for updating it to PogChamps 3. I'm so excited about the event. Will I be ready? Will I manage to beat Beth Harmon and claim to be a PogChamps participant? No. I'm a coach, but I want to be a very good coach, of course. So knight d7 I think is a good move. Knight takes c6 is the other option, but again, that's a pawn up for, well, actually 2 pawns up, sorry. I forgot. I forgot I'm already a pawn up. Wait a second, then why is she doing this? She's gonna be 2 pawns down? I completely forgot she already sacrificed the pawn. This is how my brain works, because for one pawn, she had enough compensation for one pawn, so I considered it dynamic imbalance. I didn't think that white was much better. But if it's gonna be two pawns are quite a lot, you know, even if it's opposite color bishops, which would be this position. Or I can go for knight d7 and then rook f7, knight b6, and I'm gonna win. I think she'll double rooks on the f5 there. Takes. I like that. That's just 2 pawns up. Let's go. Let's go for it. Knight d7. I sure hope my calculation makes sense, because I really want to win another pawn. I want to win another pawn. She's playing rook d8, but this is where I thought... Okay. My calculation was somewhat bad, because here I wanted to play bishop c7, but this move order makes sense for her, because after bishop c7 she will then place the rook on f8, and then my pawn on f2 will be hanging too. But the bishop on e7 will be hanging as well. This is very complex, so move by move it is. Bishop c7, rook f8, I takes back, rook takes d5. She can take on f2, because I cannot take the hanging bishop because I get a back rank checkmate. Great. But other than that, all of her other pawns on the 5th rank will be hanging too. So I think this is still a good line for me. It's somewhat trickier now that the f2 pawn will be gone. So bishop c7, rook f8. I take here, takes, rook takes. And I'm pretty sure she wants to take on f2 or play bishop c5. Bishop c5 is a good move. My bishop is hanging. I have to come back to guard it. Takes everything on f2. Can she survive the rook endgame? Is this her idea? Now I'm thinking maybe I should have gone for the opposite color bishop endgame, because I forgot. I forgot that with this move order, she's gonna have some counter attack on the f2 pawn. So that's a bit annoying. That's a bit annoying. Any other move order that makes sense? If I take immediately, it's not the same, because she can take... Well, she takes with the rook, takes, rook e5, for instance, to attack this pawn. I think I'm gonna end up winning that pawn regardless. Takes, pawn takes. Maybe that's what she will try to do. Knight takes, pawn takes. And if I play then bishop c7, rook f8, I can also take the a5 pawn. But it's a bit annoying. Well, no, in that position she can't take on f2 because my other rook is guarding the back rank, so the bishop would be hanging. This is very complex, but I'm thinking if I want the other pawn, bishop c7, rook f8, bishop takes, what she has to do there I think is bishop c5. How many of you can see that position, that after the trade here, bishop c7, rook here, if I take this pawn, she cannot take this pawn because I'm capturing the bishop. In the other line I was mentioning, I couldn't do it because my rook would be on d5 and I get back rank checkmated. I know it's quite a mess, but these long lines can be very important. If you manage to visualize the resulting position, that will help you a lot. So it takes quite some practice solving puzzles and calculating blindfold, but once you get used to it, it helps so much to decide which move you go for, which move order, which variation is the better one. Here it's still very messy. I find it messy that after the trade, bishop c7. I mean, she can go rook a8 if she wants to guard this, but this pawn too is hanging, so that's not helpful for her. Bishop c7, rook f8. If I take this, it's not the more important pawn though. And I think there she can play bishop c5, and then this is hanging with the bishop to attacking it. I don't want the bishop to be on c5 and then allow the capture on f2. That's not too cool for me. Other ideas include even this capture, because after rook takes, I have bishop h4 attacking the two rooks. So there's loads of tactics in this position. Lots of interesting options. Lots and lots of interesting options. And I guess the rook endgame would be advantageous enough, because After all, I'm already a pawn up. I'm already a pawn up. Let's see. Which one is the strongest? My candidate moves bishop c7, or knight takes d5, or rook takes e7. And I'm gonna have to choose between these lines. I find this a critical moment. That's why I think it's important to spend more time here. I think it's very, very important to make the right call, because it's either gonna be an endgame where I'm up a pawn or two, but my opponent has quite some compensation and counterplay, especially if she gets to take on f2 and have some counterattack. So I don't want her to have much counterplay. I want this endgame to be simply better for me and without giving chances to her. How do I do that? How do I do that? I'm thinking about this endgame again a bit more. Takes, takes, takes. Bishop to c5, bishop back to g3. If then she takes on f2, takes, rook takes, that rook endgame. I'm a pawn up and I'm about to take here too, but she'll then manage to double rooks or not. I don't think she'll manage to double rook. She'll play rook c2, rook f1. I think that's the one I'm gonna go for. Let's go. Let's go. I made up my mind. I'm gonna go for this. I can also try other moves like knight d7 to attack this rook, but I don't think it leads to anything better for me, because too many of my pieces will be awkward there. If anything, I could just lose the game if I have so many loose pieces without winning material. So let's take this. And now, this is what I was calculating. If I take the pawn on d5, she can then take on f2. And I cannot take the bishop. This is what I was saying earlier. I can't take the bishop there because rook f1 is checkmate. If I take the pawn, she takes here. I could then decide to capture this pawn because that's also hanging. So that's I think something important to take into account. I was talking about the other order earlier. If bishop takes a5, bishop c5 I think is a strong move. 3 pieces of black attacking f2, and my bishop on an a5 is kind of out of the game. Good thing about rook takes d5, it controls c5. I think I might have mixed up the earlier lines because bishop c5 in those lines is not working. When my rook is on d5, she cannot play this. So I'm gonna go for rook takes d5, and if rook f2, and that's the move I think she'll play, I'm gonna take the pawn on b5, which guards this pawn, and I still am guarding c5 as well. I think that's a good option for me. Let's go. Do it. Do it! Do it for the family! Right, the tomato family that is. Bishop to h4, she's going for that attacks f2 and my bishop. It could look scary, but there are a couple of solutions. I could either play bishop b6 and guard this, or I could block it straight away with bishop g3. I think bishop g3 is the stronger move, I feel like, because it steps in between the bishop and the pawn, so she can't really take on f2, and if she takes my bishop, I can take back with the f pawn, and that saves this tiny soldier from being captured. So here's where I can take back with the f pawn, and that saves my pawn. It still is an open fight for her, and I cannot move this rook away because then I get checkmated. Very careful. I need to be very careful. I'm 2 pawns up, but there could be a checkmate that I blunder if I move this rook from the back rank. So there are back rank issues. She's trying to escape on the queen side with the least damage possible. She's trying to trade this pawn, but I can just simply take this one, and this will be a capture, a simple trade for me. Yes, it makes my pawns vulnerable, and she can then try to attack them, but it's quite many pawns up already. This is my 3rd pawn. These are doubled, so this is not the best. These are doubled, but it's 3 pawns. Even if I lose 1 pawn, it will still be quite some advantage. Of course, I don't want to lose these. These are my best pawns. Those 2. I know they are not very advanced, but they are passed pawns. That's something. She's attacking my pawn. Now I can move this rook away from the back rank if I want to, but I feel like my king will be still quite vulnerable. So I might just make this ugly move. It's very ugly. It makes my rook passive, but later in the future I could place it on b3 and then push. So it's an ugly move, but temporarily ugly. It has an idea behind it, and that is to try to trade rooks here. I could go for that now if I want to play that rook endgame, because it does give up my c pawn, but then I can support my b pawn as a Tarrasch rook. The Tarrasch rook is supporting the pawn from behind and then push it. And I have an extra pawn on the king side, which is not that much of a big deal. I think that could still be a draw position, that rook endgame. So maybe I shouldn't go for the trade instantly. Let's see. So one of my options is to trade and go for that rook endgame where I'm 2 pawns up, but unfortunately this is doubled pawns. That's so much of a main topic in rook endgame books. If that b passed pawn is winning, what is it that black has to do? On which square can black stop my pawn? But my rook is active. My rook is supporting the pawn from behind, so I think that's a good chance. Other option is to not trade just yet, but instead support the pawn first. And then if I trade, this is not hanging. That perhaps makes even more sense, because I don't have to give up the pawn. At the same time, if I don't trade right now, then after this move, black could come here, and that will mean that I no longer have rook b3 because she will take my pawn on a2. So will I want to allow rook b2, rook c1, rook b2, c4, start pushing the pawn, or will I trade and go for that rook endgame? I could also prevent rook b2 by placing the rook here. I think that's what some of you were suggesting. That's an option that I could consider because the check doesn't matter too much, I guess. I can come here, check, here, check. Uh-oh. Well, maybe it matters though, because my other rook is not helping. No, I don't want that. I don't want my king to be chased. I could end up losing my rook. It looks like a good defensive move, but I don't think it's safe. I don't think it's safe when I give the back rank and the f-file away with this rook. This rook is very passive. It will only be okay to have this rook if in the future I can move it away somewhere more active. Let's go for this endgame. That will be instructive at least. So this could be close to a draw, but I think I have quite good winning chances when it comes to okay, she's blocking it as soon as possible. This is the thing. So I have a passed pawn and she wants to block it ASAP. She wants to make sure that after b4 she can block it here. Then we both will bring our kings, king, king here, and then going toward the rook. I'm gonna attack it though. I think this is fine. Let's go, because my king is pretty fast as well. So both kings will be running toward the queen side. Run! Yes, run further! Push it away. Push the rook away from b5. So her king is further. Why did she go f6 here, by the way? I thought she was gonna copy me. I thought we were gonna follow each other and then the king would be guarding the rook. Instead, she wasted a tempo. She wasted a bit of time there because now she plays king e6 and I'm here. She cannot guard the rook anymore. Why did she do this? Why would she want this? Now I can push. Yes! We are there! We are there! Here, there are a couple of things I could do. I could give this check to chase the king away from the protection of the c5 square, and then my king can go further. I think that's a very appealing option. I could also push the pawn because I'm not really scared of black going to capture it, because b6, king c6, even b7 there. If we play that king and pawn endgame where we trade everything on b7, that has to be a winning endgame for me because I have 3 versus 2 on the king side, but more than that, what matters is that my king will get to her pawns faster. So b6, the idea of pushing the pawn all the way to b7 is that then she cannot activate her rook. So b6, king c6, b7, even if she doesn't take it, king c7, I'm gonna be able to move my king closer, will I not? King c5. Yeah, she should get into some kind of a zugzwang because that king and pawn endgame is terrible for her. Maybe what she will try is after b6, rook b7, but then I have king b5, king a6. This position is winning. I'm just trying to make sure I play it the most accurate way because I love endgames and it's like this is winning, but I already spoiled the game against Beth and I'm worried that I'm gonna spoil it again. So I'm just double checking everything. I think both ways are winning. Which one is easier? Not sure. I like both. I'm just torn between two good options. Both of them seem to be very good. Let's go for this. By principle, I saw the check coming a mile away. Seriously, Beth? Okay. Alright, cool. If you saw it. And now I'm gonna support my pawn with the king. But I think the other option was also very strong, maybe even stronger. At this stage could have been even stronger. And this is when you can use the king to be in front of the pawn. She will activate her rook, so these are the consequences. If I had pushed b6, b7, she wouldn't have been able to activate her rook. But now my king is there to support my pawn immediately. So if I play king a7, she can take on g2, but I have b6, and I'm 2 squares away from promotion. If she gives a check, I go to b8. Let's go. I sure hope I didn't mix it up. Now I feel like b6 was perhaps stronger because I'm just like seeing ghost and I'm feeling like maybe I've given her too much of a chance to defend. I might have given her too much of a chance. So this is an endgame that has to be winning, but again, I already spoiled the game against her and I'm terrified of doing the same. So the bridge will be something very important here, but in the meantime, we're gonna push the pawn 1 square, and we're gonna make sure that she has to come back and look after this. She's stopping me from placing the king here, so now I could come here with the king and try to push my pawn. If I come here, usually the defensive idea is that you give a check, then you give a check again, and you try to chase me away from the pawn. But I can go to d8 and then there are no more checks, then she comes back to the b5. So it's not immediately winning. What normally happens is that you build a bridge, and that's what you guys are saying. Many of you are saying the Lucena position. The Lucena position though is with the king usually on e7 that's guarding the back rank. So that position would be that there are 2 squares under the bridge, the rook comes here. I can do it here too with the king here, to be fair. So the rook would be on the 4th rank for white, and the idea of that is that once I start running away with the king, at some point I need shelter. At some point I need my rook to help protect my king and at the same time shield the pawn. So if you move your rook here, that's the threat. If I play rook d4, I'm threatening to move the king away, and then after all those checks, all those many checks, once my king is on b5, rook on b2, then I can shield my king and I'm winning because next move I have a queen. The side, the drawback of rook d4 is that after king e5, I'm gonna have to move away. Although in that position I already have rook b4 as well if I want to, because king d6 I can move my king here, and I'm threatening to promote, check here, and I'm promoting next move. So that's quite convincing. Let's go. Let's go. The other idea, by the way, the other way of winning this is to place the rook on d8. So if the king is not on e7, you can also place the rook on the back rank, and once you run away with the king, your rook will be supporting the pawn. She's playing rook b2, but that doesn't change the evaluation of the situation. I'm gonna move my king away, and once I start receiving checks, I said checks, I can move here with the king, new check, then I can move here with the king, and if she gives a check, I'm gonna move king b5, and then there will be no more checks because my rook will be used as a shield on b4. She's not giving a check because she doesn't have to. I'm not threatening b8 right now because that square is guarded, but I can chase the king further away. I can give her a check now and chase the king further away, or I can go to the back rank immediately. Which one is more accurate? There are many ways to win this, including such as a check, and then simply you're using your rook as a shield to then go back here, or you can move the rook here right now and threaten to push. If I move rook d8, her only way of trying to get out of it is to give a check. I'm gonna run, check again, run, and the problem is that because her king is so near, I don't have a way to move away from the b and c files, so that's why giving a check first could be a good idea. She's saying she has seen this check coming. She's playing king f5. Oh, okay, wait, she's going for my pawn. So now this is the deal. I can win her rook immediately. I can play rook e8, and next move I'm gonna push, promote, and she'll have to give up the rook for my pawn. But what she's doing, she wants to get counter chances by going for my pawn and having two passed pawns versus my rook. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want to allow that. No, 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 Beth. No, I don't want that. If I don't want that to happen, I'm gonna have to keep the rook here for now. And then, in order to promote my pawn, that's gonna be trickier. That's gonna be a lot trickier. I could also play rook c4, the other idea I said. So I'm just thinking whether it makes sense to give the check or not. I can play rook c4 to then threaten king c7, because I want my rook to cut the king. I want my rook to make sure that the king cannot cross, and then I can use my rook to win. I can use my king to win her rook. Also, one thing very important. There's a tactical motive after rook c4 that she has to prevent. I'm threatening rook c5 check and rook b5. And that would be a scenario where she can't even give up the rook for the pawn. So she wants to sacrifice her rook for the pawn, but if I get my rook here, then she cannot. And that's always checks. After rook c4, I'm threatening check, and here. The question is it more accurate if I play this move first? But she most likely will go back to e6, although if she goes back... Yeah, there's so many ways. I think rook c4 is a good move here because I'm threatening this. But again, there were so many ways to get that position. She goes back to e6, which avoids this check. I can still play rook c5 and threaten rook b5, or I can go king c7 and next move I'm promoting. She has no more checks, no more attacks, so this is a winning position. Yay! Okay, she of course wants to fight. Maybe I got a little overexcited about this, but again, there are ways in which I should be able to keep her counter chances away. What she wants again is to get in here with the king. I can keep the rook on the c5 to threaten the push, but then she can get in with the king. Other move would be rook g4, for instance, that attacks this pawn. I think after rook g4 she'll give this check. Then when I move, she'll attack my pawn. What I could do is play rook g4, and after the check, play king d8. She has to go back to b2, but then when I take the pawn, I'm guarding this. Yay! She's taking the pawn immediately to not allow me to get there with the rook, but this has to be winning. I think she'll play g5, try to play... No, she's not playing g5. Well, if you don't play g5, Beth, I'm gonna take your pawn and now I'm just a rook up. I thought g5 was one of the only practical chances for her, but it's difficult to think of practical chances any longer in this game. Unfortunately for her, this is lost. I don't know how we did it. I was so worried. I'm gonna spoil it again because I had already in the previous game, check out the previous game if you missed it, against 20-year-old Beth Harmon. I had such a winning position and I spoiled it. So that's why I was really worried. I was extremely cautious, but in the end, she did not manage to. She did not manage to save this game. Not this time, Beth. Not this time. And I think I know how to win a position with the rook up. I think I know. I think I do. There could still be stalemate. If now I make the wrong move, if now I keep my rook on the g5, or if I move my king here, that will still be stalemate. So you still need to be careful and cautious. But if you just make moves that still give room for the opponent, you'll be fine. I could also play just g4. If we trade this, that's an easily winning position. And if we don't trade, I can shift over to this square with my king, and then rook coming from the 6th rank. Yay! Expanding further, pushing the king toward the edge of the board. Even if you have seen this check coming, Beth, I'm afraid it will not help you. I'm afraid it will not help you because this endgame is winning. I'm gonna take this pawn. It's still not stalemate. It's still not stalemate. King h8, king g6, and next move, check, mate. Yay! Thank you for the game, Beth. Thank you. She's saying I have only lost like that once to Grandmaster Borgov in Paris. Well, Beth, thank you for the game. It was an honor. I was so nervous the whole time when I was in a better position because of that previous game of ours, Beth. You're definitely intimidating me with your survival chances increasing constantly. I perhaps didn't even play this the most accurate way, but I felt like it was the safest. She made some strange decisions, including in the endgame. I thought she was gonna play the same king moves to try to get here. Even that position is winning for white, but it would have given more resistance. She would have showed more resistance if she had played it. And the other idea here, let me show you in a separate analysis board, that rook endgame. What I was thinking too, remember, I was thinking quite some in this position. The other option for me here is to push, and the idea is that you push all the way to b7. Ignore the evaluation bar because these decisions I think should be made in a more practical way. I find this practical because the rook cannot go away, because wherever it goes you always promote. And the rook can't take the pawn because this king and pawn endgame is lost. My king is there and will capture their pawns a lot faster than how she could approach. Those pawns are my pawns. So I think this is very practical too, to just push the pawn and make sure that this rook can never move. She can play king c7, but then you will bring the king closer. It's a game of patience too, because for now I don't have a way to make progress. At the same time, if she moves the rook away, I will always promote, give up that pawn, trade the rooks, and play the king and pawn endgame. So I think it's black who will run out of moves first, because my pieces are very active, and if she moves away with the king, I can play king b6, king a7. Perhaps this was even easier in a practical way to win it, but I'm happy with the game overall. What did you guys think about it? Let me know. Let me know what were some of the more interesting moments for you, and what would you have played differently. Thank you so much for watching. This was streamed live on my Twitch channel, where I stream full time, 5 days a week. Do catch us live next time, or follow the highlights and the votes here on my YouTube channel. In either case, I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much again, and bye for now. Until the next time.